Secretary of State is in Argentina on the second stop of his five-nation tour of Latin America. Rex Tillerson is going to meet Argentina's foreign minister on Sunday. He's using the tour to improve U.S. relations in the region. On Friday, he's met Mexico's president to ease worries over Donald Trump's comments on immigration and trade. He also wants to shore up support for Washington's tough stance on Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. Well, Robert Valencia is a Latin America reporter for Newsweek magazine. He's joining us now live from New York. Thank you very much for being with us. What kind of reception do you think Rex Tillerson is going to receive?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to your show. Well, it's going to have a very chilly reception, let's just put it that way. We all understand that countries want to have improved relationships. It's in all countries' interest to maintain healthy bilateral bonds. But Rex Tillerson is not going to have an easy job. First of all, let's start with Argentina. Even though President Donald Trump said that Argentina is a pivotal country for U.S. policies in the region, this president has had differences with Argentina. He has imposed in the past sanctions against exports, Argentinian exports, such as lemons and pork. It did not ease visa restrictions to Argentina, something that both President Obama at the time and Mauricio Macri agreed upon before. So it's going to be very hard for Tillerson to mend the fences with a region that has seen a very incendiary rhetoric from Washington.
One of the things, as I mentioned before, that he's intending to pull together some sort of unity, if you like, against the Maduro government of Venezuela. Given the circumstances, given the comments that his boss has been making about Latin America, do you think he's going to be able to achieve that?
Well, that's another catch-22 Rex Tillerson is going to find himself in. Before he was discussing the possibility of the Venezuelan military to turn against Maduro. And that is a very delicate point to touch upon because given the region's history of dictatorships and governments being overthrown by military. So that's a very...
And firefighters in Newark, New Jersey, forced to take on this massive blaze in the middle of the night, flames jumping from house to house.
I'm sorry about that. We seem to have lost our link to New York. We'll try and get it back later on in the program. In the meantime, let me tell you about Argentina's once booming biofuels industry, which is suffering after its main market, the U.S., imposed a 72% tariff on imports. The move is part of the Trump administration's America First policy to ensure U.S. producers don't lose out to foreign imports. Teresa Bo has been speaking to people in Rosario in Argentina who've been hit hard by the U.S. tariffs.
6 years ago, this factory was producing 16,000 tons of biodiesel fuel a month. Now it's down to about 6,000.
The industry won't grow. There's no investment. It worries us that the United States will stop importing our biodiesel. The industry was created to export, not only to fulfill internal needs.
Some say factories located in Rosario, in the province of Santa Fe, are Argentina's first victims of Donald Trump's America First approach to foreign trade. The U.S. announced a 72% tariff on imports of its biodiesel. American officials accuse Argentina of unfairly subsidizing the country's biodiesel industry at the expense of U.S. producers.
The decision is arbitrary, unjustified, and illegal. They discarded all the arguments presented by Argentina. Argentina has an export tax on the soybean and a different one for biodiesel. It is not a subsidy. This is one of Mr. Trump's protectionist policies.
Almost 90% of Argentina's biodiesel is directed to the United States. Cutting that flow has impacted almost 30 companies here and put jobs at risk.
Argentina is one of the world's top soybean producers, and biodiesel here is also produced with this crop. It is a crucial source of income for Argentina because it provides the US dollars that the economy desperately needs.
Dollars that help keep the trade balance in check. Since taking office, President Mauricio Macri has been trying to open up Argentina's economy.
Argentina is trying to open its economy, and biodiesel is one of the products that it exports the most. By losing its main buyer means we will have to look elsewhere. Argentina cannot afford to lose markets if it wants to get its economy back on track.
Environmentalists have long questioned the cost of Argentina's reliance on the soybean. Entire areas of the country's forests have been destroyed to grow what is known here as green gold. Experts say biodiesel is different.
The United States and Europe request a sustainability test so that the soybean used for biodiesel can be checked. Argentina has been certified and credited for this.
Argentina says it will file a complaint against the United States at the World Trade Organization. In the meantime, factories here will have to find new overseas markets if they are to save the industry and precious jobs. Teresa Bo, Al Jazeera, Rosario, Argentina.
Mexican police have arrested 3 people in suspicion of human trafficking after rescuing about 300 Central American migrants in 2 separate states as they were being transported in dangerous conditions. Almost 200 people from Guatemala, Honduras and El Salvador have been found crammed into tractor trailers without food, water or proper ventilation in Tamaulipas, which borders the U.S. And in Veracruz state, more than 100 people have been found inside containers showing signs of dehydration and suffocation. The president of the Maldives, Yamin Abdul Gayoom, has signaled his willingness to hold early elections. Unrest has gripped the country since the Supreme Court ordered the release and retrial of political prisoners. The ruling also reinstates 12 MPs who were expelled for siding with the opposition. Once they return, the ruling party will lose its majority. The opening of Parliament was meant to happen on Monday, but it's been postponed indefinitely. Still ahead on Al Jazeera, North Korea is accused of earning $200 million from banned exports, including weapons to Syria and Myanmar. Calls for the immediate release of an Al Jazeera journalist detained in Egypt. And India's teenagers make history at the Under-19 World Cup. Farah's going to have all the details in the sports.
Hello there. The clouds are all gathering across North America. They're sweeping their way eastwards, and as they do so, they're bringing a fair amount of rain and some snow as well. So wet weather here for the southern parts of our chart, and further north, that's where we're expecting the snow. And some of that snow really will be very heavy. That system, though, isn't sticking around for too long. It's marching its way eastwards, should be well away from most of us as we head through the day on Monday. Still just clinging on to the eastern parts of Canada. Behind it, it won't be that warm. We're looking at 5 in New York. Further west, another weather system working in from the Pacific will be bringing us snow there as it makes its way across the Rockies. A bit further towards the south, and for many of us across the Central Americas, plenty of sunshine, not really a great deal of showery activity at all at the moment, just a couple making their way towards that coastline. A bit further towards the south, though, and here there certainly has been very heavy rain. In Bolivia, we've got a lot of flooding, and that flooding is now raging its way down the rivers. And this is what we're seeing in the northern parts of Argentina. There's a car, and then if we wait a little bit longer, we can see a lorry there being brought down by that floodwater. More showers still to come as we head through the next few days. Gradually, they are pushing their way northwards, but some of them, again, on Sunday, could be very heavy.
It's like the Wild West. They can do anything, and it's really hard for them to get caught.
The all-powerful internet is both a tool for democracy and a threat.
Somebody who controls 10,000 bots, they're controlling 100,000 voices, and they distort the debate.
In the echo chamber world of fake news in cyberspace, the rules of the game have changed. There are no precedents. People and Power investigates Disinformation and Democracy Part 2, at this time on Al Jazeera.
One of the really special things about working for Al Jazeera is that even as a camera woman, I get to have so much input and contribution to a story. I feel we cover this region better than anyone else.
Working for Al Jazeera is very challenging, in Lebanon in particular, because you have a lot of people that are divided on political issues.
We are with the people. We live to tell the real stories. Al Jazeera's mandate is to deliver in-depth journalism without fear and favor to the audience across the globe.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. A Russian jet's been shot down by rebels over Syria's northwestern Idlib province. Russia's defense ministry says the pilot managed to eject but was later killed near the town of Sarajevo. Italy's prime minister has condemned a drive-by shooting targeting African immigrants, warning hatred and violence will not be allowed to divide people. Police arrested a man who'd been making a fascist salute after 6 people were shot in Macerata. At least 11 soldiers have been killed in a suicide bomb attack in northern Pakistan. The soldiers were playing volleyball in Kabul, a town in the Swat Valley. 13 others were injured. Qatar's defense minister says Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates had intentions to invade his country last June at the beginning of the Gulf diplomatic crisis. Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah has told the Washington Post that Qatar's Gulf neighbors have, in his words, tried everything to destabilize the country. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt and Bahrain have cut ties with Qatar and imposed a blockade after accusing it of supporting terrorism. Doha strongly denies the allegations. A UN human rights body is calling for the immediate release of an Al Jazeera journalist from jail in Egypt, saying his imprisonment violates international laws. Mahmoud Hussein was jailed almost 14 months ago for broadcasting false news to spread chaos. Both he and Al Jazeera deny the accusations. Hussein has repeatedly complained of mistreatment while in prison. Elizabeth Witchell is with the Committee to Protect Journalists. She says many countries are using vaguely worded anti-state laws to imprison journalists.
When it comes to imprisonment, we're seeing those numbers rise over the last few years. And 2017 was a historical high in terms of the imprisonments that we've documented worldwide. So in that sense, we're seeing it's an extremely precarious time to be a journalist, particularly if you're a local journalist and you're covering your local communities. You're from the countries where we see repressive tactics. In terms of violence, we're still seeing journalists attacked routinely, and we're still seeing high numbers of journalists killed. Last year, we did record a small drop in numbers of journalists killed and journalists murdered. This is a welcome development, but this is also a drop following years of historical highs in that area as well.
Okay, let's go back to our story that I was talking about earlier on. The U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in Argentina on the second stop of his 5-nation tour to Latin America. We were talking to Robert Valencia. He's a Latin American journalist. He's a specialist from Newsweek. And thank you very much indeed for rejoining us. I'm sorry we lost the signal earlier on. We were talking about the fact that Rex Tillerson was attempting to try and drum up some support for a unity amongst Latin American countries against the Maduro government in Venezuela. You were explaining to us what you thought the circumstances surrounding that would be.
Correct. So it's a very difficult circumstance for Secretary Tillerson. For one reason, the country's implementing sanctions against Venezuelan officials. Obviously, it's not in the U.S. interest to establish economic sanctions for the country as a whole. And obviously, Tillerson was talked out of the idea of suggesting that the Venezuelan militaries will actually turn against Maduro because of the history of governments being overthrown in Latin America for decades. One of the things that I wanted to point out is 12 hours ago, we've heard President Trump saying that he would consider cutting funds to countries that pour drugs into the United States. Obviously, we're talking about Colombia, and Tillerson is going to Colombia. So he's not going to have an easy job to explain what Trump just said moments ago. And Colombia is a very important South American ally, if not the most important ally in South America, because it's just right next to Venezuela. So it's very important for Tillerson to give a great explanation to President Juan Manuel Santos and all Colombians who basically expect funds to fight drugs in Colombia, but at the same time, a country that has been able to in a way, retain the populist wave coming from Venezuela. And now that we have elections in Colombia, so that plays out very well. So what I mean is that Tillerson is not going to have a very easy job now that Trump made this comments moments ago at the Office of Customs and Border Protections in Northern Virginia.
Around the world, in most countries, politics is about pragmatism and what can be achieved. So it's kind of working on two levels, isn't it? There's the kind of response to Donald Trump's rhetoric that we've talked about, but also there's the fact that the U.S. is still a significant investor in Latin America, in certain parts of Latin America, as you mentioned, but also it's a big market for Latin American countries as well. Given all of that, how do you think the people within the Latin American countries are going to react to this visit by Rex Tillerson when he's trying to persuade their governments to make these changes and to address these points, at the same time is faced with or backed up by the rhetoric of his own president?
You mentioned a very important word here is pragmatism. Despite all the rhetoric that we've heard, that we keep hearing from President Trump, many of these countries understand that the friendship and the economic ties to the United States goes beyond any government, beyond any administration. Let's just say President Trump will just have 4 years or 8 years maximum in power, and relationships should remain. And I think that's what a lot of presidents in Latin America understand. From Mexico to Peru to Colombia and Argentina. I think the most important thing here is to, for President Trump, is to really show that he has an interest for the region. It remains to be seen whether President Trump will show up at the Summit of the Americas in Peru next April. I think that will be the ultimate rite of passage for Trump. But again, all the rhetoric, all the incendiary comments that he has made ever since he kicked off his presidential bid won't be easy. But pragmatism is the key word between the United States and the rest of the hemisphere.
Robert Valencia is a Latin American reporter for Newsweek magazine. We appreciate you sticking around after our technical problems to give us those answers. Thanks very much indeed.